Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for the numbers to go up and we'll get started in a minute. Good morning, everyone. So we're just waiting for people to join the call, but it looks like we've got a healthy amount, so we might as well get started now, I think. So welcome to our webinar, From Pitch to Published, A Guide to Media Relations in 2023, with Stephen Waddington of Wadds Inc. I'm Phoebe Jane and I work on the Viewlio and ResponseSource content teams. So yeah, working in the UK PR and comms, media, marketing industry, you likely will have heard of Stephen or worked with him or are hoping to work with him in the future. But I'll just give you a short introduction now to tell you a little bit more about him. So Stephen Waddington is a highly regarded figure in the public relations industry. He has worked for companies including Amazon, The Economist, and Virgin Media Business. Along the way, he has written 10 books and served as president of the CIPR. He is the managing partner of Wadds Inc. and is a PhD researcher at Leeds Business School, where he studies public relations contribution to organisations. And without further ado, I will hand over to Stephen.
Thank you, PJ. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I started my career actually in public relations and in agency side, and it's interesting. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today remains absolutely consistent from the days when I started my career. What we did for this piece of work was we talked to agency and in-house practitioners across the UK about how their role had changed and how they were adapting to the market over the last 3 years. There's four big things happened within the media industry. There's, inevitably the pandemic, which means people, ourselves are working from home, as are journalists. There are emerging technologies that are having an impact on both public relations practice and on newsrooms. So AI, the fragmentation of media, which has been the story of my career, continues at a pace. We're seeing actually practitioners, in addition to pitching all the media they have always done, are increasingly looking to media such as newsletters and podcasts. And then there's the commercial pressures that journalists are under, like never before, actually, to hit KPIs in terms of page views, opportunities to see, reach, engagement, and so they themselves are under huge pressures. Now, there's 5 things I'm going to talk about. The report we've written and published covers. There's a section on relationship building, a section particularly looking on the impact of issues of working from home, because it's harder than ever to get hold of a journalist. There's a section on technology and how that can be used to improve the relationship we have with the media. I call out explicitly face-to-face meetings and press events, because there's a lot of discussion about that. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with some recommendations from a mixed bag, if you like, from some of the interviews we did with practitioners. So let's kick off and let's start with building relationships with journalists. I'm going to talk for about 15, 20 minutes or so, and then hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end for Q&A. So I said at the outset that the fundamentals of media relations have never changed throughout my career. And this first point about getting to know journalists, getting to know the publication before you pitch, is as important as ever. And it has remained a constant, if you like, throughout my career. And that is before you start to even begin thinking about pitching a journalist and pitching a publication, get to know their beat, get to know what they write about, get to know the publications. When I started my career, we had to read the national newspapers every morning. We had to listen to radio news. That was all part of the role. And, you know, we could do well to remember that, so that before you even start, you're ahead of the game. Now it's easier than ever, thanks to LinkedIn, thanks to social forms of media such as Twitter. Twitter's still being used predominantly as a channel for social media. Sorry, for engagement with journalists. It's easier than ever to understand journalists, what they're writing about, what they're thinking about. So, you know, we've absolutely no excuses. Second point here about human relationships and journalists being people too. This is an important factor. The relationship between a journalist and a good public relations practitioner should be equitable. You know, it's a common view that there's been an erosion in the quality of journalists since COVID because of the lack of face-to-face meetings. That can be true, but you know, a personal approach in terms of getting to know a journalist, understanding not only their professional sphere but their personal sphere, which you can now, thanks to networks such as Twitter and LinkedIn, goes a long way to building a relationship. There was some really good insights came out of the work, the interviews we did, actually. Things like recognizing birthdays, recognizing anniversaries, commenting on articles that journalists write that you have a particular interest in, or you think are good. In fact, it surprises me how few media relations practitioners ever thank a journalist or even share their copy after it's been produced. But, you know, we all have our own social media channels, and we can do that. This fourth point relates to the issue of KPIs. You know, journalists are all driven by newsroom metrics and deadlines. They've always been driven by deadlines, but the newsroom metric is an important feature. They all have KPIs to hit. So understanding that and how your content can help them, how your story pitch can help them hit those metrics, helps them. That might be search, it might be reach, you know, it can be any number of things, but it provides you with an additional opportunity in which to appeal to a journalist's interest. If you can say, look, we've done some digital planning around this topic, and we understand there's an awful lot of interest in it at the moment, it will give you an additional angle. You know, equally related to that, thinking about the media pitch as not just a press release, not just a story, but a package of material that will provide longevity as assets on the media's own digital sites and amongst their digital communities. And the final thing is, don't take shortcuts in terms of building relationships. The point about deadlines is more important than ever because of the pressure that journalists are under, the pressure that practitioners are under too. But it's really important that you support journalists in hitting deadlines and don't waste their time. So, be straight, be honest, be frank, be candid in dealing with your relationships as you would with any form of relationship. Second point I'm going to move on to is the impact of working from home on the pitching process. Now, this is much discussed within media relations because of the impact of COVID. It's possible. There was that week, wasn't there, in March 2020, when suddenly we all shifted from work to working from home. We took our laptops, our computers, and we set up home offices, and we're still there. Many of us are still there because of the benefits we've discovered of that. And working practices have completely changed, not only in public relations, but also in newsrooms. It's harder than ever to do a call round to get hold of journalists. And I think that's got to be an accepted fact. So we're using Twitter DMs, we're using online platforms to establish relationships, and a phone number, journalist phone number now is sort of a second level second level of a relationship that really gives you a closer relationship to a journalist, that enables you maybe to connect with them by phone or by WhatsApp. But that has put an important pressure point on public relations practice, and you just have to be more creative in the way that you're pitching. There's a woman we spoke to called Abby Bennett at PropellerNet, who's trained in psychology and shared with us a really interesting approach to pitching, using a variety of different means to engage with the journalist. So in addition to the story pitch, having images, having case studies, having a context that appealed to the audience of the publication you were pitching, and mirroring the style for journalists. And I would encourage you, if you've got the report that we've produced, to have a look at that, because it's a really interesting approach of using a psychological approach to engage with the journalist. We love to hate Twitter. We're going through an odd relationship at the moment as practitioners with Twitter. The media, despite the shenanigans with Elon Musk, still uses Twitter. And so practitioners still use Twitter. It's a really important way to follow what journalists are doing to their areas of interest, and to spot opportunities when they're calling out for sources and for material. Equally, it's a really good means for building relationships and to build those means. So many examples of where practitioners said they'd followed a journalist and listened to them over a period of time, and then starting to engage with them and use that as a means of building a relationship. It works really, really well. In working from home's changed not only how we pitch journalists, but it's also changed the workflow of agencies and of newsrooms. They're less collaborative. So the notion that there was a fixed cycle to a newsroom, and indeed a press office these days has changed. It used to be read the papers first thing in the morning, issue pitches ahead of morning conferences. At the moment, journalists seem to have changed that. The morning conference is still there as a medium to discuss the agenda for a day within a newsroom, but there are also opportunities throughout the day, especially in the news environment we're working within, to pitch. So recognize we can pitch throughout the day based on different times with different story ideas, understanding what the context of the news agenda. And that reverts back to that point about KPIs that often you'll be able to newsjack an emerging news story and help a journalist, appeal to a journalist who's having to ensure that their media covers a story and has appropriate reach. So 4 things there. The challenge of not being able to do ring rounds anymore and having to be more creative, the need to use storytelling, the point about social media and social media being a really effective listening tool to listen and engage with journalists and the news agenda, but also to pitch, and then the changing working cycle. I'm going to continue with the point about social listening. Social listening, not only on Twitter, but on LinkedIn, is a really good way to connect with journalists, keep track of their work, and to start build relationships. And, when I started out, I had a Rolodex. I would encourage anybody working in modern media relations practice these days to use their LinkedIn network as that to build relationships with journalists. Databases such as those provided by Vulio provide a really good means of providing an initial sift of a media list in a sector or market or around an issue, and a means to pitching. So use those, but reach deeper into those to build relationships. Now, there has been a shift over the last 5 years to organizations using CRM systems as an application on top of a media database. So this is again using tools like Vulio to build a list and a database of journalists, but then to track the relationships you have as a team. It's very common in large organizations, particularly in public sector organizations, to do this, where you're managing a busy press office, and this gives a sight to gives a single point of truth and sight to anyone in a team pitching. It also helps you understand who within an organization has pitched a journalist and how that has landed. My final point here is there's a whole array of inbound tools and messaging platforms now that you can help to understand and connect with journalists. So, we're on a Vulio webinar, so I'm going to call out specifically Response Source, the journalist inquiry service, but there are also hashtags you can follow on Twitter, where you can, journalists will turn the tables on practitioners and look specifically for opportunities and content around case studies, content pitches around topics that they are writing about on a news agenda. A lot of discussion about press conferences and face-to-face meetings through the interviews that we had. These are viewed at the moment as premium opportunities. Unless you're a FTSE organization, you're a globally renowned brand, or you're doing something incredibly creative, it's going to be really challenging to get journalists out to come and meet. Sorry, I should add to their exclusives. If you've got a senior level spokesperson, there has to be a level of exclusivity to get a journalist out to a face-to-face meeting. They still happen, but there has to be a significant public interest, or there has to be a topic around a level of complexity that means that any other medium doesn't work. You have to be offering something additional. If you do manage to get journalists out and run an event, obviously it's a great way to build human relationships, but there are also lots of other ways you can do that. So face-to-face meetings, press events, there has to be a high news value. There has to be some aspect of exclusivity. It's going to be really hard to get a journalist working from home or under pressure to hit KPIs to come out and do a face-to-face meeting. I wanted to leave you with some ideas, and this report that we published with Vulio is full of really useful nuggets of information and helpful ideas about pitching and practice. I want to leave you with these four in particular. I started out saying, my career was in media relations within agencies initially, and I was drilled in immersing myself in the news and understanding the news agenda. And I think you have to think like a journalist in the modern public relations media environment. You have to immerse yourself in the news, and you have to be as interested in the news as journalists themselves are. Take a genuine interest in real time. It's the first comment. Second one is the mindset of a journalist and understanding what they need to write a story. And the pressures they are under to deliver. We're all under pressures in a commercial environment, particularly post-COVID, but journalists more so than ever understand those and understand how you can help a journalist achieve their objectives. The third point relates to these two, if you like, pitching to the audience of the media that you're pitching. So journalists as an intermediary to a publication and the audience you want to reach with the story. So if you take an audience perspective to the story you're trying to pitch and publish, that is also going to help put you in good stead. The final point is also back to where we started about human relationships and taking a human-led approach. There's some great comments came out through some of the interviews that we did. I'm going to call a couple out because I just love that. Andy Barr at 10 Yetis, who many of you may know, his fundamental tip was don't be a dick, don't push a dead story, research before sending it out, and don't be creepy in your pitching. And then the final point here related to humanity is Mark Rolfe, who came up with this, made this great suggestion, very simple suggestion, but in having a consistent profile photo across all your social media partners, so specifically Twitter and LinkedIn, and having that as part also of your email signature, so that when people connect with you, they'll connect with you, yes, as a name, but also they'll connect with you emotionally because they'll see your picture. We connect emotionally with photos, and it's a good means of, it seemed to me a really good means of making that human connection. So no surprise, as a result of this piece of work, I've changed my profile across all platforms. I've got a consistent profile, and it's also in my email signature. So this project's had a lasting impression on me. I hope that's been useful. I think we've got about 8 minutes left. I just want to give a quick call out to all the people we interviewed as part of this. So our thanks to all these practitioners. I've named some of them by name. I would encourage you, if you're not already, to download the report, because it's full of goodness about media relations practice. And it's full of really good, solid tips about working in this modern environment. And with that, I'm going to say hello again to PJ, and hopefully we've got some time for Q&A, PJ.
We have indeed. Hello again. So we've got lots of good. Hello. We've got lots of good questions for you in the chat as well as in the Q&A section. So I'll head to the Q&A section first, and we'll see. So let's see what the question is. So, so the section, the fundamental section, you mentioned digital planning. So just a quick question from Jess Farmery. So what do you mean by digital planning exactly? If you could explain that a little bit more.
Okay, so if an online publication will typically have KPIs driven by a certain amount of reach and profile within Google News. So the media will be motivated, the journalists will be motivated by landing their story within Google News or high up within Google search rankings. If you can do any search planning around your story, your topic, your issue, that proves the case to the journalist that there is a lot of interest in this topic, that it is going to drive engagement and clicks onto the website, and that will help you. So use the digital tools we have at our disposal to help with your pitch.
Okay, cool. And we've just got another one through. Are there any different approaches or tips, tricks when building relationships with journalists in Asia?
I haven't worked in the Asian market for a long time. Asia is a culture. The Asian cultures, respond to a lot of the aspects that we talked about in terms of human relationships, in terms of face-to-face content. So I think a lot of the ideas and themes that have come out of this work will be consistent and will work there too.
Cool. And I'll head to some of the questions in the chat as well. So how do you navigate the paid media side of pitching? We have had coverage from a magazine. They included our products in a weekly roundup, but it's because they wanted us to pay to be part of the digital campaign they are running. However, we cannot see the benefit to us from the campaign. How do we continue to cultivate that relationship without committing to the paid opportunity?
So this has been an issue for throughout my career. But previously, before paid media, journalists would ask you, publications would ask you, tends to be niche, tends to be trade media, would ask you to sponsor supplements, to take out paid editorial and special features and so forth. And you've got to make a value decision based on the value to you as an organization. I mean, often there will be a separation between ad budgets and public relations budgets, media relations budgets, but increasingly they are being integrated. It's down to a value value judgment. If you think you're going to get value and you want to build a long-term relationship with the publication, then it's probably worth investing. If you want to, it tends to be that most publications are still good, and there is a separation between advertising, clear separation between advertising and editorial. But within trade media, especially within niche B2B media, no, there's often a blurring, and that comes down to a value judgment, and that value judgment and ethical judgment as well.
Cool. Next question. Newsroom KPIs, especially in local press, tends to lend itself to celebrity and sensationalist stories. As a charity, we want to steer away from sensationalism, but have great beneficiary impact stories. Can you suggest how we might be of mutual benefit to the press? And is this where newsjacking comes in?
Yeah, so really good story. So really good point. Yes, I mean, you can see this across all the regional news, in that they run increasingly amounts of celeb news and news driven, by the consumer agenda, because they want to get eyeballs, local eyeballs, and as far as I can see, it's a race to the bottom. Because I can't see how, yes, it will drive eyeballs from search, but I can't see how it's building local communities. The charity point is a really interesting point, because alignment with the celebrity has often been a way and means of getting cut through in the media. But equally, I would suggest, and we don't know, do we know what the charity is?
No, but please, whoever sent in the question, please feel free to put that in the chat.
Local engagement through issues relevant to the charity, case studies and so forth work really, really well.
The charity, it's Dementia Adventure.
Right. It's addressing an issue, aging population, an issue that's affecting everybody, and that touches all our families, and so the way I would suggest there to cut through is to appeal to the human interest story, and through case studies. It's challenging though. Yeah, I get that.
Okay, and so we've got lots and lots of questions. I think after, maybe if we try and go a couple of minutes over just to get a few more in, but I will say I'll drop my email as well in the chat as well, if people want to send in some more questions for Stephen that maybe we could follow up with afterwards. So let's see. So we'll get as many as we can. So another question: could you please expand on using hashtags to discover case study requests from journalists? And I'll just, because I'm very cheeky, I'll just quickly say, please do use the journalist inquiry service, as well as the hashtag on Twitter, because it's great. But yeah, Stephen, if you explain.
Yeah, there's a whole load of, journalist requests. There's a whole load of hashtags, that you'll find fairly easily. If you go and have a look on Twitter, we've got an uneasy relationship at the moment with Twitter because of Musk, but while journalists are there and while media's there, we're still going to be there. And response source cuts through that by providing a direct channel between the journalists in your database and practitioners.
Awesome. So some journalists have mentioned they don't want to be contacted first via social media unless they put out a specific request. Do you think this is a common attitude or more of a one-off?
Yeah, so there's a fatigue, isn't there? If people abuse these, as soon as a new channel emerges, if it gets abused, then journalists are going to get pissed off by that. Don't abuse them. Do be respectful. Ultimately, if a professional is saying, I don't want to be contacted by WhatsApp, Twitter DM, you've got to respect that, and you've got to find another creative way to get through.
Okay, and how would you recommend PR people who are based out in the sticks outside London build bridges in a cost-effective way with national journalists who are mainly based in London? You know what? Some of the best publicists, in fact, there's a woman who took part in this, brilliant publicist who took part in this episode, this project called Jill Kent. PR Superstar is her agency, who work in all sorts of different parts of the UK. I would say actually COVID has democratized what we do, and because everybody is
faces the same challenges of not being able to meet directly with journalists. It doesn't matter where you are. So I think, actually location has been removed as a barrier. And yeah, some of the best practitioners are, around the UK, they're not in London.
Okay. And on engaging with journalists via socials, would you recommend engaging with personal accounts or rather organizational accounts?
Personal accounts, don't be creepy though. If a journalist is, most journalists, because they use Twitter as a means to gather stories and listen, connect with each other, connect with good public relations practitioners, will, make it obvious that they are, they're open to being contacted in a public sphere. Don't be creepy about it. The way to do it is to follow a journalist, listen to them, importantly, totally underrated media relations skill, but a really important one. Listen to them for a period of days, weeks, and understand what they're writing about, what their interest is. They will inevitably share some personal aspect of their lives as well. And then start, when you're feeling brave enough, start to engage with them. Start to comment on the stories, I've done this, I read something in the FT, I've read something in, my local paper, and responded saying really appreciated that. And you'll very quickly build a relationship. Don't be a dick, though. Really important. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick, don't be a creep. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
We all need to remember this. So another question, I'm not sure if you maybe want to go for another few minutes to answer
keep going.
questions. Yeah. Okay, so after working as a journalist for a few years, I never really received pitches, just press releases. Now working in PR, I'm encouraged to send pitches. What is the advantage of this method? So
there is an aspect of media relations that's based on telesales where journalists will organizations will push out press releases and then jump on the phone and call selling it. It doesn't work anymore though, because you can't get hold of journalists to speak to them on the phone, if it ever did work actually. Unless there's something of significant high news value there, in which case the journalist is going to be contacting you. Just doesn't work. So, there are more creative ways to pitch journalists, and that's by, it's just being smarter about it. It's by, breaking down the story, finding the angles that appeal to the journalist, the publication and their audience, and, framing a pitch in that way. And that's where you're going to have much more success.
Okay, and this is a really interesting one. So it seems like this person has had some negative reporting from a particular journalist. So how do you deal with pitching to a journalist that is continuously negative about your organization? Is it even worth pitching to them if they'll continue to find a negative in it? Right.
So there's a bit, we don't know anything about the nuance of that situation, but typically, the way you deal with critics is you invite them for a discussion about why they have such a negative perception, and try and understand the reasons for that, try and meet them around those issues, get your point of view across, and hopefully build a better relationship. Sometimes though it's just not possible. If a journalist is particularly critical on a particular issue, and you think about some of the issues at the moment related to pollution, water, sewage, organizations have got to be better behaved, because ultimately journalists are just doing their job in calling out bad practice.
Okay, and what tips do you have for pitching European clients to US media outlets?
Everything that we've discussed applies. The point about understanding the media, understanding the angles, understanding in this case international relationships, and why would an international publication, US publication, write a story about a European? What's the relevance? What's the story? What is in it for the journalist, media audience? And frame it through that lens.
Okay, and how can we as a smaller charity compete with the bigger ones when newsjacking?
So the opportunity for charities is around the human interest. All publications are based on fundamental news publications are based on human interest stories. Finding those human interest stories. How do you outsmart a larger organization? And you're not, as a charity, you're not just competing against charity, competing against anyone else in the news agenda who's trying to pitch stories. You do it by being smarter, quicker, more relevant around issues. Newsjacking, we haven't really spoken about newsjacking, but newsjacking is a really good way of pitching, in that monitoring the news agenda during the day and publishing offering opportunities, offering direct quotes often, or opportunities to speak to organizations based on a point of view. Again, you have to have a point of view. Don't be bland, don't be boring, don't provide the same nonsense that everyone else. Make a difference and cut through in a relevant way.
Okay, cool. And I've just added in the chat just a link to a white paper for charities who are finding it difficult, I guess, to communicate with media when there's so many things happening in the news at the moment. So a few more questions, if that's okay. So this person works in the interior sector, and they've been looking to pitch a CEO for business profile opportunities. But do you think this would be more difficult targeting press who don't recognize their name as a usual connection? And how would you best advise that they proceed?
Go and have a look at the publication you want to target, and write and look at the types of profiles that they write. Undoubtedly, there are publications and some slots that are just reserved for the highest profile politicians or the highest profile business people. However, most profiles are written from a human interest perspective or a business interest perspective, about people we don't know, we never heard of, and so they're appealing to some aspect of what's the business interest, what's the human interest, what's the opportunity.
Okay, and would you say that shorter, more concise pitches are better than more detailed ones? And is it best to pitch a single topic rather than trying to include or saturate a pitch? And also the press release with too many elements or subtopics?
Yeah, this is really, really good question, because it's almost become an art form. And I'm thinking about some of the people that were included within, we spoke to during this profile. It's become an art form now, crafting email pitches to cut through. And so I'm going to talk about Mark Rolfe. If you don't know Mark, follow him on Twitter. Andy Yetbar mentioned already, Jill Kent mentioned, Sophie Smith mentioned, Abby Bennett. These individuals, if you follow them on Twitter, they've all perfected the art of the email pitch, and that's a really strong headline. It's a one or two line email that talks about the context and why your client opportunity point of view is relevant and is likely to cut through. But yeah, the email pitch, because we can't, we're limited in the use of phone, the email pitch or the DM pitch even is become an absolute creative art form within agencies.
Okay, and a few more questions. Are you?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, keep on going.
Let's do another 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes. Okay, cool. All right, we'll see how we can get through these. So what are your thoughts on webinars as a substitute for a journalist getting out into the field?
Yeah, really good. The interest, really good, because it's replacing that. It's providing face-to-face contact, but it's removing the need to travel. So yes, it does work. You've got to have a topic or point of view of interest. Actually, webinars, journalists are more comfortable with webinars than ever before, or video meetings, because we've had no other way to operate for at least 2 of the last 3 years. So they can work really, really well. But you've got, if you get an opportunity to speak to a journalist on a webinar, like any opportunity, you've got to deliver. You've got to have a story there, something interesting. The spokesperson has to be there and be willing to not perform, but pitch the story too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question, which tools do you recommend to assist PRs with pitches? And I'll just quickly say again, Video Media Database and Response Source Journalist Inquiry Service. And yeah.
So, I'm not going to list a huge list of tools, but, the tools that actually really good place to start is, the social networks for insight. So we talked about Twitter already. We've talked about LinkedIn already. Reddit's another interesting place because you tend to find that stories that do the rounds on the first or second page of Reddit inevitably make the leap within 24 to 48 hours into mainstream news cycles. So that's a really useful place. We've talked about using Google and understanding the potential of a story to cut through. So anything like Google Trends, Answer the Public, and then the planning tools that help you understand an audience and the size and scope of an audience, they're all invaluable.
And what's the best way to get ahead of the game and find out ahead of time what publications will be writing about? Are newswires still as powerful as they once were?
Newswires and press release wires have become a function to ensure that piece of content gets out and into the public sphere, like a website, and hits the mainstream news desks. So yeah, undoubtedly they still have a role in a regulatory market. There's often a reason an organization has to publish. It almost becomes like legal disclosure. So yes, they still have a role. For pitching, though, email one-on-one approaches have got to be the way to work.
And so this person, I've noticed a trend of journalists describing themselves as either SEO journalists or trending journalists. Could you explain how they decide what to write about? Is it as simple as looking on Google Trends and guessing what they're likely to be writing about? So
this is exactly the same as this is the flip side, if you like, the mirror of PRs describing themselves as digital PRs. This is just journalists that are digitally savvy, that that are using trending topics, that are using embedded within the algorithms of the main social media platforms to push their content forward. It's development of Lab Bible, BuzzFeed, that sort of whole genre of media.
And I think I probably know what you're going to answer with this one. So should social channels to create relationships be personal accounts or agency social accounts?
Personal accounts. I think the agency account or the organizational account is a corporate account that has a particular tone of voice. I think everyone needs to operate as an individual personally on social forms of media.
And this is a nice direct one from David Jenkins. What is wrong with picking up the phone?
Often you just can't get a hold of journalists. They won't have if you've built a relationship with a journalist, it's likely that you will have their phone number. But it's now sort of a second level of level of the relationship, second or third level. If you have got a phone number, you have got a story, then yeah, by all means, if you've got a relationship, ping a WhatsApp. If your relationship has moved to WhatsApp, or pick up the phone and ring them if you've got a story that is appropriate and pertinent, or if you know them on a personal level.
Okay, and how can we make our press releases stand out through the email subject line?
There's a whole sphere of media relations and creativity aligned to writing subject lines, and I don't. I'd urge you to go and look at that. Make it personal, make it relevant, get rid of corporate speak, get rid of nonsense, and appeal to the human interest, the story that you want to tell.
Okay, and I think our 5 minutes are up. We do have quite a few more questions coming in, but shall we save them for a follow-up post? And
yeah, we could do that. Yeah, let's do that. Otherwise, we could go on for a couple of hours by the sound of it.
Yeah, this is an absolutely huge subject. So thank you, everyone. I've dropped my email address as well for getting in touch after the webinar is over, getting in touch with more questions for Stephen. And yeah, this will be available to view afterwards as well. But thank you so much for all the great questions and for coming along and joining us. And thank you so much, Stephen.
Hey PJ, great to do this, and thanks everyone for the questions. Yeah, obviously we knew when we were putting this together it was a hot topic. It's clearly as hot as we thought it was. So undoubtedly be a subject that we return to.
Absolutely. Okay, happy pitching everyone, and have a good day. Okay, bye bye.